Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Susan Posnock, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Education at Jewelers of America. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler and Jewelers of America's co-branded webinar series. Today's session, How to Attract and Retain the Best Talent, is co-hosted by myself and Lenore Fedow, Associate Editor at National Jeweler, and features our guests, Constance Palomalu, Chief Operating Officer, Zachary's Jewelers, Adrienne Sonogo, Founding Board Member and Education Chair, Black in Jewelry Coalition, and Peter Hartz, Senior Manager of Career Services at Gemological Institute of America. Before we begin our discussion, I wanted to note that Jewelers of America is currently conducting a comprehensive salary and benefits study, which I know is relevant to those attending, and we've gotten some questions specifically about this topic. We need owners, managers, and HR professionals to share input on a secure jewelry industry salary study platform that we have for this. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link into, let me see if I can figure out how to do this. There we go. I just dropped a link to the platform in the chat, and I'd encourage attendees to register for the study or share it with the appropriate person within your organization. The study will provide key data for JA's updated guide to careers in the jewelry industry, which is being revamped to better attract the next generation of talented jewelers, something I personally see as critical for the ongoing vitality of the industry, and I'm sure our guests today agree with that. Speaking of input, I just wanted to let our attendees know that if you have a question, you can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. I will share questions from attendees following the main discussion, and we'll get to as many as possible. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler and Jewelers of America websites in the coming days. So, to kick off the conversation, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to please share what they see as the biggest challenges facing the jewelry industry in terms of finding and retaining new talent. Anyone want to jump in? Adrienne, I see you're not on mute, so I'll pitch it to you first.
No worries. Thank you, Susan. And thank you for the sponsors who brought us all together to talk about this important topic. I think the biggest challenge in the industry for our industry in particular is the pandemic. We lost a lot of talent, and we lost it in different ways. So now we're trying to regroup, find new talent or bring talent back into our industry. And, we've also had to pivot and learn how to work from maybe not home, but from different places, right? So we're now trying to reintroduce hybrid situations, or going back completely into the office, or just staying at home. I think those are the biggest challenges facing our industry right now. And then there was the supply chain that impacts everyone in the industry.
Okay.
I would actually jump in and say that I think one of the largest things that's affecting our industry right now is something that we're seeing across the board, which is that people are shifting their expectations of life and what they value. I think COVID gave a lot of people time to think and reflect on what matters to them, and it's increased their expectations. I think we were actually on the benefiting end of some COVID frustrations, in that, one of our new hires was just tired of teaching. It had been an exhausting year for her, and she said, I just need a break. And she has found our industry to be wildly refreshing. Another also worked with children and parents, and with the stresses in other industries, I think we're really fortunate, and we have to remember that, and we have to lead with the fact that what other business are you constantly coming in contact with people who are mostly happy? They're mostly celebrating really incredible events. And I think when we forget that, that's when it becomes really challenging to recruit.
And that's exactly right. I'd like to jump in here. I think the pandemic did have accelerate a mind change or a shift here within our industry, not only for those that are seeking jobs, but those that are also employers. We did lose a significant amount of talent, primarily on the manufacturing side. I do know that there's quite a shortage for talented goldsmiths and bench jewelers that are here within the industry. And it's been sort of a pain point across all verticals of our industry now. But I also think, as Constance and Adrian had said, really shifting priorities and understanding what it is that people value in a job or they value in terms of employment. And I think the biggest challenge now is really coming together and bringing the job seekers as well as the employers together in some type of a compromise where they can both understand and both meet each other's needs, because business still does need to happen. We're a very hands-on industry. It's not necessarily an industry where every job can be remote. But at the same time, there does have to be that work-life balance and sort of that culture balance for the employees that are coming in. And employers need to understand that aspect, and the job seekers need to understand that as well too. And really being able to, find that middle ground and come together and everybody look at it with a fresh mindset is really what's going to help drive success.
That's great. That's, all, great advice. It makes me think of, actually, Adrian and I did a panel back last August on a similar topic. And one of the things that came up was I had been looking through, some feedback we'd gotten from some retailers and JA members about their career, their staffing needs and so forth. And one of the people who had written something that struck me as interesting, which is when you look at a job description, people write things like, looking for like a challenging position and things like that. And then Constant mentioning how yes, of course it's challenging. Of course, the work hours can be long and so forth, but to actually push that it's exciting, to use words and language that make people feel enticed and interested. They don't want to necessarily go to a job where they're going to be like, worked to death. Nobody wants to do that anymore. So I think that's a great point. I think that I'll shift over to Lenore, who also, we each kind of go back and forth in terms of questions. And because I feel like my second question, which I had here, was already kind of answered by you guys. So Lenore, why don't you take over?
Yeah, will do. I'm full of questions. So I'm going to be speaking more from an employee's perspective rather than an employer. So when my job is hiring, one of the most one of the first things I think of is how this new person is going to fit in with the rest of the team. And if we choose this person, what is the dynamic going to be like? Because that affects, how my day-to-day job is. So how do you involve your existing employees in that process and sort of making sure that it's all a really cohesive fit?
So I'll jump in. We implemented a really formal interview process, and this is something that I'm incredibly proud of our team for doing. But a few years ago, we said we want to be the best place to work, and that means the best people all the way around. And we had spoken, Evangeline and I she's our chief experience creator and sales manager. She and I had been speaking with a gentleman out of Oklahoma, and he said, I don't hire anybody. He said, my team hires every new team member. And we thought that was really brilliant because no matter how great you think you are as a trainer, you're not going to do all the training. The people who work with your new employee are going to end up being your trainers. Even if you have a full-time trainer, the people that are working side by side with your new employee are going to end up being their trainers, and their energy and effort that they bring to that individual will make that individual's time and experience so vastly different. I like to joke and say that my first job in the jewelry industry, I got horrible training. Stellar Catalog was my trainer because the first woman that I worked with said to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to my customers. You go sit over there in the corner. I'm not going to waste my time training you. You're a floozy. You'll be gone in 2 weeks. Oh, okay. It was abrasive for me. I had a thick enough skin, thankfully, to sit in the corner with the Stellar catalog and teach myself. But we can't expect everyone to do that. I wouldn't expect my younger sisters to, start a career that way. And so just because that's the way that we were trained doesn't mean that's what we should expect of the younger generations, or even just incoming individuals, whether they're older or younger. So I think being aware of the fact that matters. We really implemented a step-by-step program. So we first do a digital interview. If the person passes the digital interview with our sales manager, we bring them in for an in-person interview. And that in-person interview is with Evangeline, myself, and Steve, the owner here. From there, if we think this is a good person, we see something there, and we're not looking for somebody to have experience. We're not looking for somebody to be, drop dead gorgeous. We're looking for somebody who seems to value the same things that we value. We value family, we value friendship, we value being casual and natural with other people. And if we think we see that, then we move into the third phase. And the third phase is the most important because this is really where someone is going to get hired or not. They go to lunch with our staff. We managers hold down the fort and our entire team goes to lunch. And that gives them an opportunity to chat without management, to get to know one another. It's a great opportunity for the team to find red flags, to find if they're invested in training this person with you. Because if the sales team makes the decision, I'm going to like selling with this person, they're going to teach them more. They're going to feel more comfortable in their existing positions. Because I think one thing that people constantly worry about as an employer is, what is this going to do to my new employee? So just like when you're thinking as an employee, how is this new person going to affect my job? Or as the new person, how am I going to affect the team? Employers have to be realistic about that. We're people at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right, Constance. I think the first step in really involving the team there is just understanding and being honest with yourself and what the needs are of the business and of the position, because not everybody can be the same and everybody has different motivating factors and different working styles. And so you have to, number one, be aware of the staff that you have. What are their working styles? What is the style of personality that is going to be best for that team to drive the success? And then once you have that there, as you said, I love your idea of taking them out to lunch and really involving the team. I mean, I think that's great. And I think just in a roundabout, no matter how you do it, whether you're sharing resumes or having conversations with your team, I think the point is just to make sure that you are involving the team, because they, as you said, you spend most of your waking hours at work and working alongside of these people. And it's not just about getting through the interview process and getting that new hire, which can obviously be a relief for all of us, but it's about retaining the employee. It's about making sure that they have the training, the culture, the staff around them, so that that person will be there for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and can really make an impact on your overall business. And so I think that's really innovative, Constance, of what you're doing and taking them out to lunch, letting the staff do it. But really, it starts, as I said, in just understanding your own business needs, the goals that you want to have. And again, as you said, being human and thinking about the others that you work with day to day and how this hire will affect them.
Yeah, I love Constance. I love that format that you guys are using. And it used to be that was only used for like high level C-suite people. I like that it is being used more broadly, because it's a really good idea. Because as you mentioned, the people who will be working day to day most often with the new hire are your core team. And I would even go so far as to say, like, what we do where I am is we as a team, wherever this person is going to land, the interviewee or prospects, we look at the resumes together. We create the questions for the interview together, and then we create a panel of the people who will be working with this person. And we haven't gone as far for our regular staff to take people out for a meal, but I think I'm going to introduce that. I really like that idea because without management, as you said, people tend to be a bit more themselves and they're not performing. So I'm going to steal that and then I'm going to give you credit for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea because I mean, you could be a wonderful person, but just be a bad fit for this position. And it's just going to throw off the whole dynamic of the team. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. So my next question, also sort of from an employee perspective, you know, speaking of hiring, you know, I'll speak to friends and peers and they tell me, I'm having such a hard time finding a job. And then I'll speak to retailers and they're telling me, I'm having such a hard time finding employees. So it seems like somewhere along the way, you two are missing each other. So my next question for you is, where do you go when you're looking for a new employee? Whoever wants to tackle that first.
I'm going to start with, so for Black and Jewelry Coalition, we have, every member has a space where they can advertise for jobs. So I would say trade organizations are a good place to look, whether it be BIJC, WJAJ, whatever it is. Most of those organizations have a platform where they advertise for positions. Also, word of mouth is a lot of things that we, you know, a lot of us use that. Sometimes your customers might make good employees. It just depends, you know. You might see something in a customer that you might think is a good fit for your team. And so that could also be another potential good place. And I have seen people use social media platforms to advertise for positions. And of course, you would go through your normal processes of screening and the like, but I think those are good places to start.
Yeah, I'll second that opinion there. I think really looking into industry organizations is really starting. You're going to find a group of like-minded individuals that are committed and passionate about the industry. And if you can find somebody through those organizations, that's always a plus, let's say, and knowing that you may be able to have that retention that we're looking for with the employee. Places to look, GIA, we do host our Gem and Jewelry Career Center. It's an industry-focused jewelry-only job posting board and site. JA has a site. WJA is fantastic. Black and Jewelry Coalition. And then, of course, all the usual channels as well, too. I think the biggest thing to understand, whether it's a job seeker or an employer, is that this can be a process. You really want to give it as much structure and as organization as possible to be as effective as possible overall. And there's not necessarily one answer. So you want to, in my mind, and what I will advise some of the employers or job seekers is cast as many nets as you possibly can. Let's get out in the community. Let's get onto the different job boards, attend industry events, and then look on social media, because that's another really popular place. If you have a lot of followers, you are able to connect directly with those potential job seekers right there in the palm of their hand in a quick second and flash. And then you're using the language that they can relate to. And that's what they're really going to be attracted to. And you're creating almost more of a proactive approach rather than just reactive and waiting for somebody to come there. You're saying, hey, we're hiring, come out, this is exciting. Here's a link to the full job description itself. And so there's quite a lot of ways out there, but as I said, it is a process, structure, organization, and just getting into the community and letting people know who it is that you're looking for, what it is that you need as a job seeker.
Constance, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I can speak to having success on social media. In our last major hiring round, we interviewed quite a few applicants, but we were getting applicants from TikTok, from Instagram DMs, from Facebook. Ultimately, one of our new hires we found from LinkedIn. She found us. So instead of saying we're hiring, we invested time in creating a culture book, talking about what it's like to work at Zachary's. Somebody had said to me once, I think it was Peter Smith, nobody hates a bad salesperson more than a good salesperson. And so if you think about, trying to attract people, I tend to think about attracting salespeople because I think that's one of the places where a lot of jewelers are frequently in need. Since we're a family industry, a lot of times the behind the scenes things can be filled with family members, but salespeople can be challenging. So I think we have to think about what things do we value when we're shopping and really apply that to how we're pursuing people. I had a friend who was a basketball coach, and he said whenever he was hiring junior coaches, he always looked to see who their partner was. He said if their partner was a dynamic individual, then he knew that coach could recruit. And I think it's similar, there are things that we can look to target people. Like Adrian said, our customers are shopping. Our customers know what experience they expect from us. They're also going to notice when they experience that same thing somewhere else. So we've had employees come to us as referrals from customers who had maybe been sitting at a bar somewhere and met a bartender or a server who said, this person doesn't really belong here. They are providing something above and beyond, and I feel like they fit here better. And so really being open and honest. And then the other thing I think is really important to note is it's important to tell your existing team first before you start posting on social media and job boards, because when people don't have all the information, they make up the stories in their own minds. And then you might be in need of hiring more people than you think. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You definitely want to let them know first so nobody thinks they're getting the axe without without prior notice. I've asked a couple in a row now, so I'm going to pass this over to Susan.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to switch back a little bit to more of the higher, broader picture in terms of finding new employees. But, all of that's been really interesting to hear. The question that I had is something we've already touched on really from the opening question, which is, what do employers need to know about people seeking jobs today in the job market today? What do they need to understand about those folks who are, looking to join the jewelry industry for the first time? What are some key things you think you need to think about as an employer when you're approaching the job market as it is today?
I think the first thing that, as an employer, the advice that we give to them looking for employees or approaching the job market is just understanding that your job postings or your job descriptions that you're putting out there are a marketing tool that is a direct reflection on the level of candidate or the type of opportunity that you're providing. No longer can we just assume that because they get to work with diamonds or platinums or a specific brand that they're going to want to come and work for you. It is a two-way street. You actively have to recruit the candidates that you want. And you can really do that by, again, giving it the structure and the organization it needs and understanding that it is a marketing tool. We want to talk about how great the environment is. We want to talk about the company's vision, its mission, its values that we have, what will make you successful in the role, the type of training it is that you get. Really talk about all the benefits that come with employment outside of what's just in a paycheck. We want to build that this is a career, somewhere where you can learn and grow, and within the next 3 to 5 years, become an expert in your field. Those are the types of things that if you begin to approach the job search or the job searching market with, you're going to find success in there. And I think that, again, COVID and the pandemic had kind of shifted some of our perceptions on that, but it's really, currently it is a job seekers market right now. They have so much opportunity and so many roles that are at their fingertips with the internet. We really have to ask ourselves, what are we doing different to attract the talent that we want? And I think approaching it in that way will really help set you up for success.
I agree with Peter. I think that people are very savvy. In fact, job seekers are being advised to ask certain types of questions of the employers, like, why do I want to work here? What do you have to offer? Like, they're asking them to go deep, and the employers are finding themselves having to prove or really court, I want to say, the job seekers at this point. It's like, why should I work for you? What do you have to offer? So it has really, like he said, has become a job seekers market to some extent. And in our industry, there's also the added layer of this industry operating a lot on trust, word of mouth. And it's a very small world that we work in, but it's big, but it's small. So I think telling people that when they are seeking jobs in our industry is very important, because it's a relationship building industry as well. So those are some really key things I think anyone coming into our industry should be aware of. And do you have the skills and the capacity to operate in that manner? I think that's really important for a lot of the roles. Not all of them, but a lot of the roles do rely on those characteristics.
I think one thing that's important to remember, as jewelers, speaking as a retailer, we run the risk of forgetting what's important. And it's easy to think that our most important and valuable assets are in the case, but our most important and valuable assets are not in the case, they're holding the keys. The people that we have under our roof are our biggest and best assets. A good salesperson will sell old merchandise or make up new merchandise to sell. A good inventory person will save you time and headache. A good bookkeeper, you can't go wrong with a good bookkeeper, right? Everybody likes to get paid and to not lose their money. And we have to remember that the people are more valuable than our goods. And if we remember that and we lead with that, it becomes much easier to meet people's demands. When they say things like, I'd like to spend time with my family, or maybe I'd like to, be home in time for dinner. If we treat the people that we're hiring like they are the most valuable part of our business, a lot of things start to make more sense.
That's great. And, the other thing that I was thinking of as you guys were speaking is, while yes, like there's obviously the retail front-facing aspect of the industry, there really are, as I've been working on our careers guide for Jewelers of America, there really are so many jobs within this industry that aren't necessarily right there on the surface. And I know, Adrienne, that's something that you focused on a lot in terms of stressing some of the behind the scenes jobs and opportunities that are available in the industry, and to look at it as a whole perspective. And maybe somebody isn't right to be a salesperson, but maybe there's something in that person who you interviewed as a salesperson where they have other skill sets that would fit within your organization, to keep an open mind. Moving on to the next question. Education is obviously critical in the industry. I know that one of the things that we've heard from members is just the need to not just find new employees, but find people who either already have the experience and training or are trainable. And I'm just wondering, to our panel, what role you think education and training or mentorship play in finding and retaining talent in the industry?
I think education for certain things is actually necessary to perform certain roles. Having said that, it's very important to find someone that's trainable and has the right fit and culture for your staff, your current staff, right? Because a lot of things can be trained. You can invest in your employees by sending them back to school, which is a nice perk when you're hiring people. If you have the ability to pay for people's education, that's a very good perk to offer your current staff and anyone coming in. So I think education is very important. Sometimes it even impacts your insurance costs. It can lower them in some instances if certain people have a certain criteria or certain credentials. And I think it's a good investment and you can't go wrong with it. Also think about in-house training, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be an institution, an outside institution. It could also be something that you're doing inside. But the key is you're making your business better, you're making your employees better, and you're all going to benefit from it. And your customer at the end of the day will likely be more happy because you've invested the money in education that makes the product better and the services better. So you could be educating people about customer service or about how to close a sale. It doesn't have to always be about, mechanics or science or something like that. It could be overall, just how does this business work better with education as a component. So I think it's education on some level, whatever that looks like to you, and training. I think it's very important, and it always will be.
I agree, Adrian, but I would say for me, I mean, education is key. Education is the foundation, especially in this industry, being here at the Gemological Institute of America, that really allows our graduates and students or prospective students or those that want to get into this industry to open up the doors. And as we all know, our industry is changing so fast with technology and different treatments. And really over the last few years with the laboratory grown diamonds coming onto market, everybody is thirsty for knowledge and for education. And as I said, it really provides the foundation. And it also does give you a glimpse into a candidate as to, what is some of their motivating factors and are their drive. If you're looking at a resume, you can see how much, how many classes they've taken. Did they do extracurricular classes? Did they finish their business degree? How are they going to fit into my role, let's say overall? But I think, Adrian, you had a great point that education doesn't necessarily mean having to be a formal education. You can conduct and create in-house trainings for your staff. You can look to additional organizations like GIA to do continued education or to do corporate education. Just showing that you're reinvesting back into your staff really helps build that overall buy-in and increase the morale amongst the staff. But that education comes back twofold. And now that they are proud, they're knowledgeable, and then they can transfer that information to your customers. And that ultimately builds trust, because when they come into your store or they come into your place of business, you are the only one that gave them this tidbit of information or of knowledge. And they've been to 5 other jewelers and nobody else told me that. So you know what, now they're going to come back and now they're going to start trusting you and trusting the brand. And it's always a great return on investment for any level of education. And I think really just exploring the options that are out there and not letting the word sort of get in your way. There's opportunities for everybody, whether it's small investments in education, or you can look to even larger investments with your staff. But education is always key and really helps build a foundation for success within the industry.
I'm going to be a little bit of a rebel here in this particular crowd and say, as far as hiring goes, I care very little about a person's education. And I think part of that is it can be tricky if you're only looking for those who have GGs or those who have been able to do coursework on our industry. There's a little bit of classism at risk because it's not inexpensive. And it isn't something that everyone has had access to or will have access to. Realistically, there are a handful of scholarships, but I think we've got a lot of work to do as an industry on making it more accessible and really, not to get political, but I think a little bit of nationally, we need to do some work for trade schools to be more affordable and more possible and viable. That said, I firmly believe that education is the key to retention and the key to recruiting in the future. Because if you educate someone, it creates a bond. It creates a bond between you and the student. Teacher-student relationships are some of our most crucial relationships in life. Our parents teach us things, our grandparents teach us things. These are the people that are important to us, and we have that obligation to our teams as well. And when we provide education, there is a loyalty that tends to develop there. That said, we can't demand that because we've educated someone, now they're our slave, now they're tied to us, right? We have to be okay with the student surpassing the master sometimes. And I may not always have a position that's appropriate for one of my students. And in nurturing that student, just like I do with my children, at some point they may have to leave. And I think we have to, as an industry, start to be a little bit more okay with that. Because we've kept everything so close to the breast, I do see a lot of people struggling with that concept of, oh, but I'm gonna pay to educate them and then they're just gonna leave. But if they served you while you were paying to educate them, you still benefit. And I think that's really something that I would like to make sure people recommend or recognize.
And Constance, that's funny that you say that. I remember years ago for a job interview, the interviewer told me directly, they said, we know this is not going to be your last job. And, it just immediately put you at ease because you're like, yes, I'm not going to be here for life, but it's great. As Adrienne was saying earlier, we are a small industry and it's always great to know those that are willing to invest in you. And even as myself, I want to invest in my staff and others within the industry. I want to see them grow. I want to see them flourish and really achieve all of their full potential there. And as we say, if you're looking to hire, just coming into it with that mindset and understanding that they may not be here forever. Our position may have an average turnover of 2.5 to 3 years, but we understand that and we want to do our best for our staff because ultimately that's doing the best for our business and our clients. So I think that's well said, Constance.
Thank you. All great points. I'm going to turn it back over to Lenore, who has some other really relevant questions when it comes to, what the employee is seeking.
Right, yeah. So as someone who covers financials for National Jeweler, I'm going to be talking a little bit about compensation. And I'm going to get a little frank here because I am speaking as an employee and not an employer. And just as an aside, I am speaking generally, and this is not in reference to my employer or any employer. But I do hear a lot of employers talking a lot about company culture and how important that is. And I think that is absolutely true. But I hear a lot less said about compensation. And I think that topic is only going to get more important as attitudes about work are shifting, like we've spoken about before. You're seeing the rise of unions, of workers advocating for themselves, of demanding a living wage. So, I'm in my late 20s, and I'd say for my generation, we are moving away from this idea that your work is your whole life. And I wouldn't even say, a lot of people use the phrase work-life balance. I would say younger workers are prioritizing their personal life and putting their happiness, their health, their well-being above everything else. And that's not to say that they're not also going to do their best professionally, but their priorities have definitely changed. So, I could absolutely love my job, love the people that I work with. If I'm not being paid enough, if I'm being paid unfairly, if there were no benefits, then it doesn't matter how much I like you. That's not going to work for me. And I think a lot of people would say the same. And so I say all this to get down off my soapbox and ask my next question, which is, how do you decide what is fair compensation for a position that you're looking to fill? Whoever wants to jump into that.
I think first to really understand what the fair compensation is. Again, it's really going back to Constance, talking with your bookkeeper, looking at your financials and really understanding what is within your budget to pay for this type of a position. Also, what are your expectations of this? What is your return on investment for the staff, but then also being fair with what is within the marketplace itself. And then ultimately, if I were to be, let's say, an employer or a store owner, you have to look at it realistically. What is the cost of living within the local area? If I hire somebody, I want them to live on their own. I want them to be able to provide and pay for their bills, pay for food, hopefully have a savings account, all of that. Like, what does that cost somebody at the end of the month? And am I in line with the compensation that I'm offering based on what my business can afford to pay this position? I mean, it's really looking at all of the numbers and coming up with what is fair. But then also, not only in that, but future planning. Say I agree to pay a certain level of salary and this hire just completely exceeds all of my expectations. I want to be able to reward them for that compensate or, for their contributions as well too. And so I think having those conversations upon hiring or setting goals and saying, look, here within the first like 6 months to 12 months, we can reevaluate your compensation overall and see the contributions that you've made. And depending on the types of roles, I think transparency is key, and really letting them know. I think about an on-site goldsmith or an on-site jeweler. Let's say that they are bringing in a lot of additional business for custom work, or they're bringing in additional business for repair work, and they're really being able to add to that bottom line. We want to let them know and say, hey, you're doing a great job. I think you're worth a lot more than what we were. Or you can say, look, here are the numbers. We really need to have a better output. But it's really just numbers and looking at everything and assessing it. Again, there's no magic formula where you say, oh, this role is worth this much money here. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but really, I think taking an honest look at your business, an honest look at the market, honest look at cost of living and what it takes, and really thinking about what is the level of talent that you really want to bring in, and that can help you come up with a number.
Yeah, I think you have to look at compensation in your area. What does it cost a person to live? And that's really, I think, the biggest thing that's going to make a difference from location to location is how much does it cost a person to live in your community. And of course, you have to marry that with how does it fit into your numbers. So sometimes it can be challenging if you don't have KPIs, if you haven't been tracking, performance indicators on whether or not your business is on an upswing or a downswing. If you don't have a baseline, that can be challenging. So you've got to start there. And that's something that has to start at the top, because only you can make those differences in where you're spending and if you can afford to bring someone on. And then you have to decide, at some points, you may have to decide to take less out of your business personally to increase your time away. But I think absolutely our upcoming generation is really great at working to live, not living to work. And I think that's positive. I also would say that I hear you. There's a lot of talk about company culture ahead of compensation. And I would say that if you think your company culture has nothing to do with paying people a living wage, you're on the wrong track. I think if you're really talking about company culture, that's going to come down to people's lifestyle in the store and out of the store, or in your business and out of your business as well. And I, for one, don't want a company culture of people starving at home or, coming to work as a volunteer. We don't run a nonprofit. I don't expect the people here to volunteer their time. They need to be compensated, and they need to be compensated what they need to survive, but also what they could make somewhere else. So that all goes hand in hand, and that may be a determining factor in whether or not somebody is a right fit for you. Earlier you touched on that sometimes somebody's not a right fit for a company, but that doesn't mean they're not a good person. Well, if you can't afford to pay a good person, you're not doing yourself or them any services by expecting them to work for less. We've got to be realistic about that. And I think if you're talking about company culture and you think that's not a part of the conversation, I think you're really missing something, because, we said here, we want to be the best place to work in town. Well, what does that mean? It means we had to make sure we had the right benefits, because, were we offering health benefits? Were we offering a competitive 401k? Were we offering, sick time, additional leaves? Were we really being competitive for the people that we wanted? Just like we get competitive with pricing on product, we had to get competitive with our recruiting and with our compensation packages. And that competition is actually part of our company culture. We like to win. We like to attract winners. That means sometimes you've got to give a little bit here or there. That's my perspective.
I'll just say that I don't care what industry you're in, it's expensive to not pay people at least what they're worth. And of course, there's analysis that can be done to get to that number, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to retrain someone, and that retraining someone costs money and time that you really don't have. None of us have that anymore. Time has taken on a different meaning since the pandemic, I think, for most of us. So I would say do a good analysis, as my two co-panelists have said, take in all the information and just do what's right, because it's very expensive to be cheap.
That's a very good point. So I know we also want to get to our Q&A, so I'm just going to ask one final question for me, and then I'll turn it back over to Susan. So we've talked a lot about hiring people, but how do you determine when it's time to let someone go?
When they don't match your expectations for the salary. If you're compensating someone beyond what you believe the value is that they bring to your company, it's time to let them go. And it's time to let them go, not because they're a bad person, not because, it was a mistake, but it's time to let them go before it sours the employees that are producing. And that's one thing I saw in the chat. Philip, I think you said, management by committee is dangerous. And yes, it is. But where management has to step in is in that decision to let people go, or to notify people that they're underperforming with enough time to correct it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with really management style. And again, understanding your staff, their working style, their motivating factors. I think a lot of benefits come from, giving the staff members their independence to be autonomous, but also having weekly, bi-weekly, monthly check-ins, one-on-ones. And not just, checking on their progress, but asking, providing feedback and asking for feedback as well too. What can I do as a manager to help support you, to help support your goals? Say, I see some challenges that you may not be meeting your numbers here. Why is that? What can I do to help you? And really giving them opportunities, but also, as Constance said, you really have to take note of any kind of red flags. You have to be on top of your key performance indicators and the numbers and what is really coming in, what is going out, and just be aware of it, and don't be, afraid to address it, and address it immediately. Don't let problems continue to linger, as they will transfer on to other staff members. And as I said, address it. And one of those ways is, having those bi-weekly check-ins, those monthly check-ins. They really, really help you stay on top of what's happening within the business and get feedback from your staff of, how you can do a better job of supporting them.
I'm going to first and second those comments that were made, and really communication, I think, is the overarching theme here. Staying in constant contact with your team, whether that is you at the top or whoever you designate to do that, paying attention to the red flags and then acting on them as soon as you're able to, when you have enough information. I think it's key.
Yeah, for sure. All good points. I'm going to turn it over to Susan. I know we've had a lot of stuff going on in the chat down here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if now I want to remind folks that of course, you can ask questions in the chat. There is also a Q&A tab that you can use in Zoom to ask questions, and there's still time to do that. Let me just look back at some of the comments that we've had. Well, Philip, you've been busy sharing some interesting comments, and one of them was actually kind of related to Constance when you were talking about, having employees hire the person. He did say the thing about management by committee is dangerous, which you referred to. In terms of actually hiring, do you make it clear to those employees, like, where the buck stops in terms of actually making the hiring decision? Obviously, they're going to give you feedback, but ultimately, to his point, how do you approach it in terms of the actual decision making?
So that's pretty easy. We don't send anyone to lunch that we don't think we would hire. So we really filter those people. If we know right away that something doesn't seem right, or we feel that we wouldn't be comfortable hiring that person, we don't send them to lunch.
Right. So it makes sense. You vet them first, and then you have your team agree or disagree depending upon, their perspective or share their input. I also want to just point out that he suggested a book, The Dream Manager, which speaks to the point about helping your team move on when appropriate. And let me just see if there's any. Oh, and he approves of your response. So well done. we do have time for more questions. I did get some that came in prior to the session, and I wanted to start with those. So I think we've touched on a lot of them, but one of the questions that came up was just how to initiate contacting a potential employee. Whether or not you will call them, whether or not you email, like what's the process in terms of like the basic level of reaching out to somebody that you're interested in interviewing.
I think that has to do with the position. For example, salespeople need to be comfortable speaking on the phone. So if I want to speak with a salesperson, I want to get them on the phone right away. That said, our inventory specialists, the people who really thrive back there, tend to not be as comfortable. So we might email with them so that they have, time to respond as they feel, is according to, their comfort level. So that depends, I think, on who you're looking to hire. And then how they came to you. Was it a referral from a customer? Was it, did they leave their resume? Those things are all going to be factors.
Great. I see that we have another question in the chat regarding BIPOC candidates and how do we attract them better to our industry? So I welcome your thoughts on that.
I think once again, so I mentioned trade organizations. So in this instance, I would say maybe cultural institutions, places where there's a large BIPOC population. It could be an HBCU. It could be I don't want to say religious organization, maybe a cultural organization where you know that you have a large population of BIPOC people. There are a lot, you can do a lot of the research online, and you can ask some of your customers. Actually, social media is another place where you could mine for this information. It's all out there. Most cultural institutions or places where BIPOC communities thrive are really they all have a presence on social media now. If you wanted to funnel it down, then I would start asking for referrals from people that know institutions or sources where you have large BIPOC communities.
I would say also, please try to be genuine. What is your motivation for attracting a BIPOC candidate? Is it so that you can check the box and say that you have, your token minority on staff? Or is it because you genuinely want to give someone an opportunity? Or, what is the motivation there? And I think there are some tough internal questions that you have to ask yourself first and foremost, because it's certainly going to be it's always easier to pull from our own networks. If you don't know a single minority, it's going to be hard to hire a minority. So, I think there's a little bit of internal reflection that you kind of have to start with.
And then I'll just second sort of what Adrienne was saying. I think really it's about, creating the visibility within yourself and going out there, being a part of the industry organizations, being a part of the specific groups, going out there and, sort of unveiling what the jewelry industry has to offer for everybody. The great careers that are out there, the transferable skills that we may be looking for that can contribute to that kind of success, really just, even if it's, sitting behind a computer and putting a job posting is not going to get it done. You really have to get out there, whether you're looking to sponsor a grant, you're looking to sponsor, part of a scholarship, you're looking to partner with an industry organization to offer a guest speaker presentation, or, there's a lot of creative ideas that you can get in front of the right audience that you're looking to do, to entice them to say, hey, there's a great career in the jewelry industry and you're going to be fantastic at it. So please come learn more about what it is we have to offer.
Peter, I want to second that, because what I forgot to mention, and you just reminded me, is, the authenticity, what's the word I'm looking for? Detector. Everybody has one now, especially underserved communities. They have it, and they know if you've been engaging with a BIPOC community, or you're trying to check a box, as Constance said. So that work, attracting a BIPOC person, it should have started a couple of years ago, maybe, or a decade ago. So people, they can track you now of what you've been doing. So you have to do some internal reflecting, as Constance said, and what is your motivation? And then when you do attract these people, you have to make it a culture that they feel comfortable and safe in. So that's a big part. Are you ready to do that? So please be, mindful of all of that, and do reach out to BIJC if you need help with that, because we provide the training.
And I do want to say, I didn't mean to say that that is the case for you, Philip, but I think it was a question that I've heard, and it does kind of get under my skin sometimes when it's not coming from the right place. I doubt it's you because you asked the question, but I think people need to know.
And I think also there really another thing to say, it's never too late to start. As to Adrian's point, yes, people do have their authenticity detector. They can see what you've been doing, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that should stop you from starting. Reach out to BIJC, look at other organizations that are doing things and say, hey, how can I get involved? You have to put the investment in before you can start yielding those returns on everything. And as I said, there's a great support group within our industry that can help you achieve that if that is what you're looking to do. And I know Adrian's a great contact and can really help support in those areas.
Yeah, and as I said at the top, Jewelers of America has been working. We've gotten some real input and help from GIA on updating our guide to careers in the industry, and we really want to make it almost like I think it was said, a marketing tool. Something that says this is a great, amazing industry to work in. There's great people, there's great opportunities. We're pretty much almost out of time. So I would like to just, end with a question, another more general question in terms of whether or not you feel like the industry is doing enough to attract young talent, and what more can we do? What do we need to put in our guide, frankly, that is going to be essential to making our industry attractive to the next generation?
So I'll start off with that one, because this is a big passion for me. And I think it's getting to our young people. And when I say young people, I mean the middle schoolers and the high schoolers, doing the outreach, introducing them to this industry, which a lot of them, I'm going to even say adults, don't even know it's an industry. People place of frivolity on the gem and on the luxury industry. They're not thinking of it as a business. It's a business. We have to introduce that to these kids at a young age, get them involved, do some workshops. I do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of lectures. I'm very hands-on with the kids. And I think all of us can play a role in that. Let's go and talk to them. You can do Zooms, you can be on site. I think getting them involved and interested at a young age, GIA does it as well at their Carlsbad campus. I don't know if they've resumed it yet since the pandemic, but they do a good job with that as well. So I think that's where we can start. And then there's another population of older people who may want to pivot, who have been doing something for 10, 20 years and want something that is, as Constance was mentioning earlier, like this is like a break from what they may have been doing that was really like kind of stressful, right? Not saying we're not stressful. Looking at that population as well and doing the outreach in those areas. I think those areas are really good to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Adrian. I think there are a lot of organizations that are out there that understand this. And I think, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, where the pandemic sort of accelerated and opened the eyes of a lot of people saying, look, we need to begin investing in those future generations. And I think a lot of it starts with reaching the middle schoolers, high schoolers, even some of the elementary schoolers, but also really transparency. The jewelry industry has been kind of historically a private industry that may not seem for everybody. And I think there are a lot of organizations now that are going out there and saying, look, it is an amazing industry. You get to work with some of the rarest material on earth and celebrate people's, most cherished moments. But there's so much more in that industry, whether it's logistics, it's marketing, it is content creation. There's a whole world of careers to be held here, and we're open to it. And being able to share that with others that may have a flair for, working with their hands or being artistic. Instead of going into fashion design, have you thought about jewelry design? Instead of being, let's say, doing woodworking, have you thought about being a goldsmith, and really attending collegiate and career fairs through high schools, through GIA's Gem Kids program. I hopefully can't speak for everybody here, but as a kid, I know all of us have had a love for gemstones and rocks and just the magic of digging in the dirt and you find something like incredible. But how do we continue to keep that enthusiasm going to where people can look at it and say, okay, this is a real viable career option where I get to work with, amazing things. And so we're doing a good push on it out there. I still think we need to keep the motivation up with everything, but I think communication and transparency are going to be key to our success with that.
Constance, did you have any final thoughts you'd like to add to that?
I would just say that transparency is really a beautiful thing. I think sometimes it can be scary because we think that people don't understand our margins or our pricing structures, and that can scare us from being transparent and being open. But there's beauty in it, and it's really hard to vilify the jeweler that you know. So, when we as an industry are up against the ropes and people are, saying, oh, diamonds are all blood diamonds, I don't want any of that. Well, where does that come from and how does that perpetuate? And a big part of that, I believe, is the closedness, because it's easy to say mean things about someone you don't know. And that's something that we see in the BIPOC community all the time. It's easy to generalize people that you don't know, but when you know an individual, they become a person. And suddenly you have a little bit more understanding of this person has a family. This person is probably a good person. This person, might have hopes and dreams similar to mine. So opening up our industry and bringing in more talent from different demographics and from don't know that jewelry is a viable business to be in, is good for business as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks to our panel. Thank you, Lenore, for being an excellent co-host as well.
Thank you.
And also sharing your perspective as, somebody who, in terms of the compensation, I appreciate the passion that you shared in making that point and asking that question. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but again, I want to say thanks to all of our panelists and for sharing all of your amazing insights. I wish we could have another off the camera hour-long conversation on this topic, because it's very interesting and one that I feel strongly about. I do want to say that my next question will return next week with top engagement ring trends in 2023. That's going to be on April 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And it's featuring Amanda Gizzi, Director of PR and Events at Jewelers of America, and Ashley Davis, Senior Editor, Fashion at National Jeweler. Thanks again to everyone for attending today, and to my panelists and to Lenore, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan and Lenore, and my
Thank
panelists.
you so much.
And
Well, thank you all so much.
Bye, guys.
Take care.